school, right? It's a big topic. Tuition fees are high and getting higher. So being able to fund your education with a bit of free money from somebody else is always in your interest. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. We'll go through some of the top line questions that we get from students and families quite a bit, and certainly happy to do some Q&A at the end. If I can't, answer your question perfectly in real time, we'll do our best to sort of research it, tomorrow morning kind of thing. But for now, we'll jump in. So scholarshipscanada.com is our flagship site, focused specifically on helping students find financial aid, scholarships, bursaries, some contests and stuff too. We index a lot of stuff from schools across the country, especially universities and colleges, but we really do focus as well on awards that are from non-educational admins, so companies, unions, religious organizations, and so on. But let's jump in here. So scholarshipscanada.com. The value of a post-secondary education. This data from StatCan is a few years old right now, but you can see as the chart goes across, you're going to earn a lot more money when you pursue post-secondary. We don't have too many details here. I wish we had better, more recent data, but over the course of your career, you're going to earn a lot more money. You're going to spend a lot more too, unfortunately. But really, it's more than just money. Some studies have shown that grads of higher ed are typically more like civically engaged, more environmentally conscious, and so on. Education helps create a more well-rounded person, active in your community, and so on. But the question, how are you going to pay? So these are some of the more common pathways we see: savings and work. If you're lucky enough to have a decent summer job, maybe you can save up some coin that way. COVID really threw a spanner in the works from that. But it's sort of coming back now. Still, part-time job, minimum wage, doesn't pay a ton, right? Family and parents, this is even more circumstantial. If you're really lucky, maybe your folks have set aside some coin for you, an RARESP perhaps. Maybe not. If you're not lucky enough that they can contribute a significant amount, you might be foregoing the red circle entirely. Green circle, loans. This is one you want to avoid, but it is almost inevitable for a lot of students, especially if you're going the university route where tuition could be 7, 8, 9, 10 grand per year. Loans include stuff like OSAP as well, any kind of money you need to pay back. OSAP's the way to go if you're taking a loan, as opposed to a sort of bank line of credit type option. Those are more for if you really need it, but the interest rates are higher. Credit card you want to avoid. So number 4, yellow circle, scholarships and bursaries. This is money that comes to you and stays with you. That's really what you want to get. So we think in terms of smaller awards often. $1,000, it doesn't sound like a ton when your tuition might be, again, 7, 8, 9,000, but $1,000 scholarship could cover your textbooks for the year, your Metro Pass if you're taking the subway, phone bill, entertainment, right? It doesn't always necessarily need to just be, I've got my tuition fees. Rent should be on here too. We'll cover, before we get into some of the specific details, we'll cover some scholarship myths. These are misconceptions folks have. Big one is, I don't have the marks. People feel like if I'm not a grade A student, top of my class, I'm not going to be eligible. Not really the case, at least in Scholarships Canada, for the tens, hundreds of thousands of awards that we index, majority of them don't care about your average at all. They're more focused on other things, which we will absolutely get into, but disabuse yourself of the notion that if you don't have straight A's, you're not going to be eligible. It's not really true. Tons of competition? Yes and no. Really depends on the award. The ones that you might be familiar with from the news, like Loran, TD Community, where we're talking $75,000, $100,000. Yeah, major competition. But most admins want more applications, right? And some awards get no apps at all. They're tricky to find, right? It's hard to ID who hasn't received an application, but it is conceivable that you could receive an award just by virtue of having been there, but in the right place at the right time, right? So you're not going to be open to that opportunity unless you take the proactive steps to sort of seek out these forgotten awards, turn over the stones and see what lives within. Myth 3, only schools give scholarships. This is less common now, certainly than in the past, but corporations, associations, trade unions, religious organizations, all of these places and more are giving out scholarships. It's not just U of T. If you're going to U of T, you want to think about outside institutions and organizations that might be awarding money, and we'll talk about some of these as well. Deadlines only in the spring, definitely not true. Deadlines happen all throughout the year. Almost every week we've got scholarships closing on the site. So it is rolling. There are certain hot seasons. In fact, we find October is pretty big for deadlines. April can be a big one too, but there are deadlines throughout the year. And financial need. Only about a third of the awards that we have care whether you're in financial need or not. And even that term is pretty elastic, right? If you need some money to help pay for school, and who doesn't, chances are you are in financial need anyway. So just to recap, you don't need to worry about your marks so much. There are awards for you if you can find them. Everybody gives out scholarships all year round. You don't need to be in financial need, but you do need to apply. So there's a scholarship for you. That's the general message that we try to espouse. So we'll talk real quick about a few examples. These are pretty cool ones. This in particular, retail education. All they want really is a short essay and retail work experience. You've stocked shelves at your local grocery, or you sold shoes at Payless when that was a thing. That's all you need, $5,000, and they're giving away 20 awards. Write a short essay, painless. This is an interesting one from Ulster. This is for Canadian students who are looking to go abroad, right? The beauty of this one is it is renewable. Renewable awards continue to fund you in subsequent years. So you could receive it in your first year of university, continue to keep your grades up, your civic engagement, and so on. They'll keep paying you year 2, year 3, year 4. So if you can find a renewable award, that is a keyword you want to keep in mind. This one is a similar idea, but from University of Calgary for folks who want to study abroad. Specifically, this one is in film, media, communications sort of sphere, right? But if you want to do a year in Berlin, perhaps, to study German Expressionism, University of Calgary will pay you $2,500 to help you do just that. So where do you start? These are some of the big things you want to think about when you're inventorying yourself, in a sense. You want to kind of go through some of these things. So field of study, pretty basic. This is the program you're interested in. So here we saw communications, media, film studies. Another really big sphere we see these days is STEM, right? Science, tech, engineering, mathematics. Anything under that umbrella is probably going to be pretty well funded. Certain programs are less well funded. For instance, if you are in like English creative writing, right? It's not as valued in our current day and age as an engineering degree. So the proportion of awards available diminishes, if that makes sense. Your year of study, this kind of matters as well. Most, I don't want to say most, but many awards are specifically aimed at incoming students. So these are known as entrance awards. They are for students who are coming right out of high school, right into college or university. These are great, but they often are not renewable, and you can't necessarily get them in your second year, third year. So you're going to have to dig a little bit deeper as your years continue, or find something that's renewable, ideally. Activities. This is a big one, of course. We think often in the American context, especially, of the football scholarship, the sort of full ride to play for state, if that makes sense. It's less common here in Canada. Certainly the full ride tuition scholarship is less common in Canada, but there are certainly sports awards for everything from hockey to baseball to ringette. If you've ever heard of ringette, there are even scholarships for that. So if you've played an obscure or common sport, you might be eligible just by virtue of that. Other things like religious engagement, your academics, leadership. community involvement, and volunteer experience. These three are more keywords. I want you to write them down in all caps, right? Because every scholarship that you need to apply for wants to hear about your leadership, your community involvement, and your volunteer experience. If you haven't started volunteering yet, I mean, I think Ontario high school students need 40 hours, right? So you'll have at least a little bit to graduate. But if you can get more than 40 hours or build it sort of into your schedule that this is just part of your lifestyle, that's going to look better for your eligibility and for your applications. Community involvement can mean anything from, helping out at a local music festival in your neighborhood, planting a community garden, that sort of thing. And then leadership. This one is tricky because students often think it means being elected class president or starting a club, and it doesn't need to, though it can, of course. You can demonstrate leadership qualities in anything you do. Maybe you play on a baseball team and you want to demonstrate your leadership there by taking an extra an extra responsibility on from your coach, right? Volunteering your time to help the assistant coach log some stats for your team, maybe. That demonstrates leadership, right? And you can now use that anecdote to say, hey, I've built my leadership qualities in A, B, and C. I'm not class president, but I have these skills, right? I'm cognizant of that. So again, I would really encourage you, think now about how and where you'll build and demonstrate your leadership qualities, where in your community you are getting involved, and sort of where you're volunteering. Again, these can all be of a piece, right? They don't need to be, here's leadership, here's community, here's volunteer. Build them together, but please do think about what you're doing as you are proceeding in the last years of your high school career, because demoing some of these things is going to make your application a lot more attractive. Okay. Academic average, much more straightforward. Recent grades, everyone kind of gets that. Okay, a few more. Heritage. We often think of sort of where we come from. In Canada, sometimes we kind of forget that, but there are a lot of awards specifically for people of certain heritages. The big one these days we're seeing is Indigenous, right? A lot of awards for Indigenous students, but we've even recently added awards for students of Norwegian descent, Scandinavian. There is a whole organization that offers awards to students of Polish descent. So think about your background, where you've come from. There could be awards for you based on that. Affiliation. I want to dig into this a little bit and highlight you or your family. Here we're talking companies, unions, associations. As an example, growing up, my dad worked for Coca-Cola. And so Coke is a union environment. So not only did Coke itself offer scholarships to the children of employees, right? So my dad worked there, I was eligible. He was part of a union, and the union also offered scholarships to children of members. So I was able to take advantage of some of that. I worked a part-time job at the local No Frills, and No Frills offered scholarships to students too. So really think about where you work, where your parents work, right? Different sort of groups that you're affiliated with, because they can really open doors for you. Okay, a couple more personal circumstances. This one's a little bit more intractable. Here we're talking about things in your background that you can't really control. Maybe you're a parent or member of the LGBTQ community. All of these things can open you for different awards. In fact, in our case right now, we are running the Bill 7 award, which is explicitly for Ontario LGBTQ students going to their first degree or diploma. Excuse me. So if that's anybody here, please do apply for the Bill 7 award. $3,500 scholarship, nothing to sneeze at. Okay, financial need. We talked about this a little bit. If you're not sure if you really qualify for financial need, quote unquote, you can talk to the scholarship admin. Never a bad idea if you have questions, just reach out to them. They like to hear from students. And it can help put your name sort of top of mind as well. It shows that you're engaged, shows you're asking questions, shows that you care about the scholarship or the organization. So it's never a bad idea to ask questions. Location, pretty straightforward. Not only where you live and go to school, but sort of where you're from as well. Certain small towns in Ontario will offer scholarships to students, even if you're not like there anymore, right? You come from Chatham and now you're going to U of T, you might still be open for a scholarship. So yeah, kind of dig into local community organizations, think about your location. Okay, so that is a lot to consider. Scholarships Canada, we do try to make it a little easier with our Get Matched tech. So the Get Matched is sort of like social media in a sense. You build your quick little profile here, tell it about who you are, what you're interested in. It's going to ask you about some of these things, heritage, personal circumstance, activities, and so on. You can put all this stuff in. Hit your Get Matched, and then you can see on the right here the matching awards. So it gives you a list sorted by deadline. You can click in X, check mark, etc., save them to your profile. And we also offer deadline alerts. This is one of our more popular features. And really, it is just an email that comes once a month or so and lets you know which awards that match you are closing soon. So if it's an award that fits you because you play a ringette, for instance, and the ringette deadline is June 1, you'll get an email that says, hey, don't forget. You can kind of see it buried here. We've got some newsletters as well, but the deadline alerts are really what everyone wants, and I would encourage you to check them out. Matching scholarships, we kind of touched on that already. You can find and refine and so on. These are all general tools that you will be familiar with, I'm sure. Keywords like STEM are handy if you're looking for broader categories, or you can more narrow it down by field of study and so on. Okay, general tips. Some of the top line advice that we give to everybody. To be motivated, you need to treat it almost as a part-time job in a sense. Because deadlines come year-round and because new awards end up in the database all the time, you won't necessarily be privy to everything unless maybe you're getting the alerts and really paying attention to them. But it's a good idea to put a couple hours a week into finding scholarships. That's not only using Scholarships Canada, but Google and other competitors as well, browsing around. Like the more time you can put in, often the more time you will get out of it, or the more money, rather. We recommend an hour or two a week, sort of small part-time job kind of thing. When you think about it in terms of the potential payoff, a couple hours a week at a minimum wage job will pay maybe a couple $100 over a month. But if you can land one scholarship in that time, it will definitely outpace any minimum wage part-time job that you could have. Scholarships Canada, we do try to help. The more updated your profile is, the more likely you'll get accurate matches. And again, the deadline alerts we really encourage. Understanding the requirements. This is a good one as well. I mentioned earlier, contacting the award admin is never a bad idea. Again, puts your name top of mind. It's never a bad idea to ask questions. Okay, smaller awards. We talked a little bit about competition earlier, right? Loran offering $100,000. They get a ton of applications. And so the people who are selected have come near curing cancer, right? Almost. They've developed incredible charities or whatever. Not all of us have done things of this stature, so it's worth applying to smaller awards. $750, again, it doesn't seem like a ton. $1,000 doesn't seem like a ton, but we covered some of what it could cover, or at least take a chunk out of your tuition, right? So the being prepared element, we can talk a little bit more about some of these specific elements if anyone has questions about them. But what we do recommend is pretty much having this stuff ready. So the 3 or 4 things you see often, kind of again and again, reference letters, personal statement, cover letter, and resume. Personal statement, cover letters sometimes blend together. But the basic idea is you can even now, before you start applying for awards, sort of develop these things, right? Reach out to people who would make a good referee to write a letter for you. Make sure they've got some time and feedback, maybe. Start drafting a personal statement. You're often going to be asked about what are your goals? How does your program of study help you achieve those goals, right? Like, what do you want to do next? These are questions come up again and again. You can develop a pretty good boilerplate letter, 500 words, and keep it on your hard drive, and then make edits for different awards. Specific awards will ask specific questions. Okay, you can make edits, but you don't have to write from scratch every time. Just make sure you're making those edits and you don't apply to the wrong award. And then your resume, you may have one already. Good to keep it up to date, good to have it on hand, so that if you find an award, it's closing soon, I can upload these things in no time, right? I've got my reference letters already. So really would advise having some of these boilerplate documents in your back pocket. Finally, don't give up. Again, this goes to the resiliency question, the motivation question. You're probably not necessarily going to receive the first award that you apply for, right? You may never even hear back in some cases. So you do have to be persistent. It ends up paying off often. You hear stories of joy from students who end up receiving a $10,000 award right after they applied to 20. So it's good to stay on top of it. Beyond that, we offer a bunch of tips and FAQs, lots of detail on Scholarships Canada on some of these things, how to make a great reference letter, who to ask, what should go in your personal statement, et cetera, et cetera. All of this stuff is covered in more detail in the tips and FAQs. We have social media, of course, who doesn't? Actually, the Instagram is not a bad spot. It's often got new awards going up there. Twitter is good too. We post scholarships each day. School Finder is a bit of a plug, sort of our sister site. It's more for if you're trying to find the right program or school, not so much scholarships. But if that is you, you're not sure where you want to go, what you want to study, here's me, my sort of dashboard, plenty of advice there as well. Profiles and so on, events, and that's about it. So yeah, we've done about a half hour here. Those are the real top line things that we see from students, the questions that we get. But I'm very happy, eager, in fact, to take some questions. If anybody has specific or more general, want to dive into some of the stuff we've talked about already, or a topic we haven't brushed on yet, happy to do my best to try to answer them. So yeah, thanks again, everybody, for your attention, for listening, and yeah, eager to do some Q&A.
Awesome. Thank you, Logan, for all that information. It's wonderful. I will pause to see if anyone has any questions. I did turn on your mic, so if you would rather turn on your mic to ask your question, you're welcome to do so. Or you can use the chat function as well. So the chat function is found at the top of your screen if you're on a PC. And if you're on your phone, if you just see the emojis at the bottom, if you swipe up, you can click the chat function there as well. I'm going to go to the questions to Logan that were sent in just to see if there is a few that maybe haven't been answered. Right. One interesting was, so how do you find the least competitive scholarships was one of the questions. I don't know if you have any advice around that.
Yeah, it's a question that we get a lot, and we are looking at more specific ways to integrate that into Scholarships Canada. We do have, maybe I can even find it here on an example. Yeah, you'll see it very tiny here, but we've got a monthly views counter. So this is a really rough heuristic to help you get a sense of how many people are interested in this award. So the retail education, when this screenshot was taken, more popular than Ulster, right? Low. Some you'll see that are very high. Again, it's just a general sense of interest. Finding the awards that have 0 applicants, though, we don't know how many people actually apply to these awards, right? We make them available, but we don't like run the program. So the number of applicants we're not clear on. So the monthly views is an approximation of that. The more monthly views, the more attention the award is receiving. So hopefully that's helpful. But yeah, the more obscure the award, chances are the fewer people are going to apply for it, if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's perfect. So just a question from the chat, from Vicky. Are scholarships payable the following school year, or can they be held for another year?
Great question. Yeah, so it really depends on the award. In a lot of cases, they are deferrable. So if you've received the award, but you're not going to school till next year, a lot of organizations will hold that for you. Some places will literally cut you a check. They don't even care. So that's not so common, but it does happen. On the other hand, you will see awards that specifically are not deferrable. We're running a program right now for STEM and for arts students, so it's pretty broad. 10 grand each for the award, but they are not deferrable explicitly. So you need to be attending school to be eligible and to receive the award. So it's a great question to ask the admin if you're not sure. If you've got a compelling personal story as to why you want to defer, that could be helpful, right? Because if you can make your case to somebody, then it might be in your interest. I would say as a rule of thumb, though, most of the time, it will probably not be deferrable because your eligibility is predicated upon your enrollment or attendance. So by virtue of being eligible for the award, you are attending school in September, right? So if you're not attending school in September, you are therefore concurrently not eligible. I would say that is the general rule of thumb, but there are exceptions on both sides. So when in doubt, reach out and ask.
Awesome, thank you. Another question, is there a cost or subscription fee to use Scholarships Canada? And how do you guys get paid?
No, yeah, great question. No fee at all for students or counselors or families, anybody. How we make money, we do have some ads on the site. If you've got an ad blocker, you won't see them. We also will feature scholarships. So organizations who are looking for broader reach will pay us a little bit to feature their award on the homepage, which then translates into more views and more clicks for them. This is becoming especially popular in the electrical industry. We talked about this a little bit or alluded to it prior to our session here, but there is a pretty big demand for electricians and electrical related industries and people to work in those industries. So places like Eaton and the Electoral Federation of Canada are explicitly trying to recruit students. And so they're trying to incentivize them with scholarships, paid internships, and so on. So if you are interested in the electrical industry, Eaton, for instance, right now has a scholarship running with us. So that's pretty much how we make our money. So cycle back though, for students, parents, counselors, etc., no fee at all. It's totally free. You'll see ads, but otherwise, that's about it.
All right. I know that there's a couple other questions being typed right now, but I had a question just in terms of, I know there's lots of different places to find scholarships and bursaries, and ones that are connected to schools, like specifically, are they featured on Scholarships Canada site, or is that specific to whatever school you're applying to?
Yeah, so we do do our best to inventory the current slate of awards from the big schools in Canada. So when I say big, I mean almost every. So university and college level, at least. We have less on the community college level, but for your big names, University of Alberta, U of T, Regina, Saskatchewan, like any university or college you can really name, we have a pretty fulsome inventory of their awards as well. We're cognizant that those are often easier to find for students too. Like if you know you're going to Centennial College, you can hit their website and find what scholarships they offer pretty easily. We do, of course, do our best to keep that info on the site as well. But what is generally of more value from our perspective is those awards from companies, organizations, associations, the kind of places that students aren't really familiar with. And you wouldn't think to Google, is Eaton offering me a scholarship? Unless you already work there or know somebody who does. So yes, we do have school stuff. We try to update each school about once a year, once every 2 years. It's a big project, as you might imagine. But yeah, if you don't find it on Scholarships Canada, there are a few other sites that are similar, and you can always try your school of choice's website for the most up-to-date stuff as well.
Awesome, that's great. And when so for instance, if you're applying to a college and there's entrance scholarships, I know a lot of college universities have now started where you kind of apply once and it applies to all the types of awards. There's some that are that type, which is so great, so that you don't have to do all the individual ones that kind of pertain to your profile. So when students are doing that kind of through Scholarships Canada, it's linking right to that site, right? So is that correct? And the information's kind of going right to them.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
You're housing kind of an inventory of the different awards.
Yeah, exactly. And we will mark the ones that you don't need to apply to, that are automatic consideration is the term of art that we use. And really all that means is no application needed, right? If you apply to the school, you're automatically considered. And you will see this, as you mentioned, pretty commonly with entrance awards, especially because schools are trying to attract high school students. They're trying to make it as easy as possible. Where you'll start to see more application-based stuff is second, third, fourth year. Often a lot of schools will have department awards. So if you're in the English department, they've got a slate of awards that you need to apply for. And then, of course, the awards that come from non-schools, companies, unions, etc., pretty much always need to apply for those. They're never automatic.
And are bank-based scholarships as well that, any banks that students deal with, are they housed within Scholarships Canada as well?
Yes,
Yeah.
can't say necessarily we'll have like every
bank,
award, but yeah, we do have some for sure. Might be worth a look at, in fact. One of the big ones we work with is TD and RBC, so I know we've got stuff from them, Scotia as well. Might be worth a review though.
Awesome. Another question, when should grade 11 start to apply? So are there awards offered to students earlier than just their, grade 12 year?
Yeah, another great question. So thanks for that. Grade 11 students are in a bit of a weird boat because you are eligible for some awards, but few. Let me put it that way. Because, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of eligibility is contingent upon enrollment or acceptance to a school. You're not at that stage yet. You are possibly eligible, though, for awards that are open to students of a certain age. So you'll often see ones that it doesn't say what year you're in, it just says you're 16 to 25. Okay, well, you're 16, then you're eligible. Again, it's not too common, but you do see it. We do also have several scholarships from different admins, specifically aimed at high school students. So the vast bulk, of course, is aimed at bachelor's and diploma seeking students, but some are specifically tagged for high school students. Grade 11s will be eligible for those as well. Again, so these two categories, age-based and high school diploma-based, are going to be a minority. So once you've exhausted that list as a grade 11, you're in a very good position to shore up your application for next year. So that's kind of what I was getting at with your boilerplate documents, right? Get your reference letters together, get your CV together, but more importantly, start demoing leadership, shore up your volunteer hours, right? Get out into your community, develop that history, develop that muscle, so that when you hit grade 12, you've got a strong background in a lot of these things that your admins are looking for. You've got your documents and so on. So grade 11 is a good spot to start, a sort of launching pad. Start applying for the awards that you can find, but recognize that most will need to wait for grade 12.
Awesome. And I might just take a minute. If you can stop sharing your screen, Logan, I'm just going to share my screen and share a tool that we have access to for all of our students called My Blueprint. And as you speak about this, I'm like, it's a perfect opportunity for us to show ways for students to be able to collect all of those documents, and they might have already started collecting those documents and actually being able to put them into a portfolio. So I'll just show that here. So in your My Blueprint, so you'll find this, you can log into your Minds Online and go to your My Blueprint account. And this is where you make your course selections and all of that every year. So you're likely pretty familiar with it. But if you go into this area, you can actually, in your home area, you'll see portfolio, and you can start to develop a portfolio for scholarships and bursaries as a grade 11 student or whatever grade that you're in. And in here, there's actually resume and cover letter builders. So that will help you be able to go through and do that. You can also, so if you go into your work area here, you'll see resume and cover letters, which is awesome. I know you talked about volunteer experiences as well. So under here, under occupations, there is an area in here where you can actually look up volunteer experiences. So lots of different spaces for you to look at. Resumes are here, job search, actually it's under job search. So volunteer here. You can search some volunteer opportunities to be able to add to your portfolio. So this is just a great tool for you to be able to, you can actually keep this after high school as well. So any current grade 12 students will be getting information of how to change your Limestone email that's attached to it, and be able to put a personal email in so that you, if you log in once a year, you can continue to use this tool and have access to all of those documents and portfolios that you developed. Because I know that there's some scholarships, I believe, that you can, you might have to create a slideshow, you might have to create a little essay or a paragraph or whatever. And so you might want to just house them in here. And then if there's another scholarship that asks for something similar, you can just revise and have it all in one place. So that might be super helpful. Also wanted to just quickly show everyone that there are some scholarships and bursaries within My Blueprint as well. So if you go into your home board here and go to tasks, there's a few right now that are actually ending the end of May, and then there'll be new ones that'll come up. So you can also put in, everyone will have points that they gather within My Blueprint as you do different tasks. And so you can enter these draws, which is super cool. This is a new one that they just put on, the Ontario Construction Careers Alliance's trade scholarship. So a skilled trade scholarship that's there as well. So keep checking there, because there's often ones that are there. You can see there's past winters from neighboring boards in here that have won them last month. So that's a good place to check as well. In here, just at the bottom too, there's guides. So there's guides for a bunch of different things, but there is a scholarships and bursary guide in here as well that you can have a look at and look at the steps of just how to craft things that you might need for your scholarship. So I just wanted to quickly show that, but I will go back to the chat and just see if there's any other questions. Again, please feel free to turn on your mics if you like as well, and we can take questions that way. But I'll just pause for a second and let people think of any last minute questions.
Yeah, sounds good. Having that blueprint folder designated like that is a great idea, because you can kind of keep your elements together, right? And kind of track what you've applied to, where you've used your documents. So it seems like a good idea to keep that together even after graduation.
Yeah, and I mean, it's great. A lot of our grade 10 careers and civics teachers are using that tool because as a part of that course, as you know, students have to develop a resume and cover letter and job search and all of that sort of thing. So with using that tool, it's already housed there. So students can just kind of add it to a portfolio for bursaries and scholarships and be able to have that information for later, which is awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Are bursaries based only on household income is a question.
Yeah, I think so, if I understand the question correctly. Basically, yes, bursaries will take into account, generally it'll look at sort of income level. It's sort of like OSAP in a lot of ways, right? What is your expense? What are your expenses like? What is your income like? How much parental contribution can you expect? Lots or none? Some will kind of get into the weeds like that, right? Like applying for OSAP and really require sort of itemized budget almost. Others will just ask if you're in financial need. Bursaries are more common from schools than outside organizations, if you will. So often schools will have pretty good access to financial data that you share with them. So generally, yes, it's going to be based on income. If as a student you live apart from your folks, they'll generally take that into account. If your living expenses are higher than if you're living at home, maybe not paying rent. So yes, Mariana, if I understand the question, pretty much yes, bursaries are based on household income, expenses, and so on. Expectation of like how big your gap is, right?
And students that build their portfolio or their profile in Scholar, because that would be the first step. Leaving this call, I would suggest like go try that out and build your, create your login and that sort of thing. But once they build that like it continues for, if they built it in grade 10, let's say, they just can keep logging in. Is that correct? There's no like every year you have to redo your account or anything.
No, yeah, it's
Okay.
yours until you don't want it anymore. The more updated you could carry it all the way through grad school. If you were getting into, you do your bachelor and then you graduate, okay, that was good, and I want to keep going. I'm taking a master's now. There's lots of awards for graduate level students too. So yeah, it's there until you don't need it anymore.
Awesome. Any other questions? These are all great questions. Thank you for putting those in the chat. Just going to go back to the questions that were sent in and see if there's any other ones that we haven't covered.
Sounds great. I love to get questions that I don't necessarily know the answer to either, because it spawns some good research for tomorrow.
Awesome. I think we covered most of them. So one question was like, what is the application process looking like? It's kind of different it varies, right? From one to the next. But what would you say, like, obviously there's ones that you just maybe apply for and you don't need very much at all. And you just, click apply. And then there might be ones that, what would be the most extensive one that might be like, is there ones that you have to like create a video for, or like it might take hours to maybe submit? I know myself, I used Scholarships Canada way back when I applied. I remember some of them being like, a 10-page essay or whatever, and I'm sure it's changed since then. But I'm just curious, like what would be the most extensive, just to kind of give students a bit of a range of kind of the feel for a scholarship or bursary?
Sure, yeah, no, it's a great question. I've never seen a 10-page essay, so at the very
okay,
least,
that's good. Things have changed in the positive direction.
Yeah,
I didn't apply to that one for that reason, because I just thought it was a lot of work. But
can you imagine adjudicating them too, reading through?
Exactly, for sure.
So in terms of extensive, I can actually pinpoint an award. I mentioned it earlier. The Bill 7 award that is for LGBTQ students has a famously long application form, to the point where we've tried to get them to shorten it, right? You'd get more applicants if this was shorter. But really what it asks is some of the personal essay kind of stuff. Who are you? Where are you going? What are your goals? How does your school contribute to that? So you've got all that. It also asks for a pretty fulsome breakdown of your expenses and income. So very much OSAP style. What do you make? What do your parents make? What do you expect to spend? Do you have any assets? Do you own a boat? Why haven't you sold the boat? Do you have credit card debt, etc.? Like literally all of these things are on the form. Down. So it could take you hours to pull those documents together. They actually want documents from OSAP as well to show that you've applied. So you need to have done the OSAP stuff, get those docs, and upload them. So some of these applications can be pretty long, but they are not often long in the 10-page essay type of thing. You also alluded to video. We're seeing more and more of the video statement being an option. But they are generally of the 1 to 2 minute variety and the I've shot it on my phone variety, right? Just for students who maybe don't want to write 500 words, they can speak into a phone for a couple of minutes instead. And we've adjudicated many of those, and generally it is sort of like a YouTube video. So yeah, the really long applications can take a few hours or even over the course of days, right? Because you're pulling stuff together. But for the most part, it's more like name, email, brief blurb about your goals. Here's my volunteer experience, and that's it.
Okay, awesome. Any other questions?
If not, it's guitar time.
That's exciting. I will just share our next session. So next Wednesday is our last session in our speaker series, unless there's interest for other topics that you might want to hear, and we can continue it. But our next one is Barry Botham is going to chat about how to apply for an apprenticeship, and what are the ins and outs at the skilled trades. And yeah, just all of those pieces for applications for bursaries around the apprenticeship programs. And so he will speak about that again next Wednesday from 6 to 7. We will have the recording for this one. I realize I didn't stop it, but I will squish it before I send it out to everyone. But and yeah, so thank you so much for joining us tonight. And thank you, Logan, for being with us. And I think we'll close things out there. I will stick around if anyone has any questions, maybe on a more individual level, but take care and thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much, Melissa, for having me out, and everybody for joining us. Have a great evening.